MacArthur Park has managed to remain one of the greatest breakup songs ever, even since it was released in 1968. The song's muse is Susie Horton, composer Jimmy Webb's ex-girlfriend. They met in high school, he was the pianist for a band she was in at one point. Basically everything was perfect, until they hit their early 20s. That is when she dumped him, which at the time turned out to be the perfect inspiration for a classical-sounding song he was instructed to write by a music producer. So what sets this song apart from the countless breakup songs out there? What stands out, other than its interesting compositional arrangement and style, are its unusual and moving lyrics, particularly the famous line, "After all the loves of my life, you'll still be the one." MacArthur Park is based on an actual park in Los Angeles with the same name, a significant spot for the couple, as they would share many great moments there. It was a place they often met up to eat during their work lunch breaks. The lyrics include detailed visual accounts of different activities and people they saw there. Jimmy Webb assures us in interviews that the song is, quote, visible. By that he means the lyrics aren't cryptic, there aren't hidden messages. Instead, he's candidly describing sights that he had the pleasure of actually beholding. He's not fantasizing, he's simply recalling factual events. There's no disconnect from reality here, which makes sense, because the whole song is essentially about acceptance, if you ask me, and that is exactly why I think the lyrics are so touching. It comes down to their acceptance. The opening section of the song was noted as "in the park" when Jimmy Webb composed it. This is fitting considering its purpose is to establish setting. Spring was never waiting for us, girl. It ran one step ahead as we followed in the dance. First of all, spring is a common symbol of rebirth. On one hand, he could be referring to the season of the year when they broke up. On the other hand, it could be interpreted as a way of affirming that the relationship would wither in the colder seasons and then stay dead. Either way, the atmosphere Webb creates in the first word is one of beauty, since upon hearing spring, we immediately envision flowers in full bloom. The word dance, ending the phrase, also reinforces this picturesqueness. I've noticed a lot of breakup songs have miserable, ugly imagery, as well as an accusational and resentful tone. Jimmy Webb, however, seems to shift the blame away from Susie when he personifies spring. Instead of blaming her, he's blaming the time of year itself for slipping away or running one step ahead. He even makes it seem natural. Like the changing seasons, her dumping him was just part of a biological clock beyond anyone's control. The word never gives the impression of inevitability, which not only refuses to blame her yet again, but also indicates his acceptance. The forgiveness he has for her is already a moving demonstration of his unconditional love for her, and this is only the first phrase. Between the parted pages and were pressed, in love's hot fevered iron, like a striped pair of pants. I understand the line, between the parted pages and were pressed, to mean their love story was like that from a book, amounting to an important chapter in his life that will unfortunately remain only a chapter. Jimmy Webb then strays from the park-related imagery when he mentions a hot fevered iron and striped pair of pants, which is pronounced as striped when it's sung. And yet, he is alluding to items and clothing like irons and pants that piece together a household and ultimately memories of a relationship. The somewhat irrational attachment we all have to lifeless, material objects that some people would just regard as junk because of the sentimental value we project onto them. I'm just going to dive into the second verse now before I get to the chorus. I recall the yellow cotton dress foaming like a wave on the ground around your knees. One of my favorite lines. It's quite unorthodox to just include an entire long-winded sentence like that. And pointing out a very specific memory like that alienates listeners on some level, since there's no universally relatable declaration like, I love you or take me back. Once again, he's drawing attention to the importance of objects, to clothing, in this case, the yellow cotton dress. The use of the word yellow sets up this sensory, colorful picture in our imaginations, especially with something as bright and happy as yellow. By providing us with a visual description of his memory, we as listeners are equally immersed in the memory ourselves. The second phrase, the birds like tender babies in your hands, and the old men playing checkers by the trees, the youth and rebirth and freshness surrounding baby birds is juxtaposed with these elderly men who tend to represent the end of life, giving the lyric existential undertones. However, both images are very gentle and tender. I mean, he literally says the word tender. I think this overall softness and lovingness is what distinguishes MacArthur Park's tone from other more desperate-sounding, less accepting lyrics, like those in the song Wicked Game, for instance, just referencing that because that's another well-known gem in the breakup genre. Jimmy Webb is past the stage of shock, past the disbelief and denial. All that he has left, now that he's accepted he no longer has Susie, are beautiful memories he continues to cherish. Maybe if the song did sound hot-tempered and crazy with grief, we wouldn't take his supposed love for her as seriously. After all, we could just assume that his ego is wounded and he doesn't have a clear perspective on things. But because his lyrics read as peaceful and reasonable, we can't consider him overdramatic. We can be even more certain that his feelings for her are genuine. Now onto the famous chorus. MacArthur Park is melting in the dark, all the sweet green icing flowing down. Someone left the cake out in the rain. I don't think that I can take it because it took so long to bake it, and I'll never have that recipe again. Oh no. The melting cake is undoubtedly a metaphor that mirrors their dissolving love affair. According to Webb, someone accidentally leaving a cake out in the rain was something he actually witnessed in MacArthur's Park with his girlfriend. By describing the downfall of the cake/relationship with verbs like flowing and melting, he continues to paint a picture that is accepting the inevitable. There is a sense of surrender to it all, up until the point where he admits that he can't take it. I think the emotions behind the phrase, "it took so long to bake it, and I'll never have that recipe again," adopt a more universal standpoint, since Webb essentially points out that memories, like the ones he's mentioned previously, are what constitute your time together with someone. And it's the memories that are most haunting, both because of how long they took to bake, and because of their circumstantial uniqueness that makes their formula impossible to replicate with another person. By the time he reaches the lyric, "Oh no," it seems as though he is at a loss for words. It's basically just an expression of grief without saying "oh shit" or swearing, which I find to be so simple, it's more striking than any lengthy lament. Musically, the composition then switches to a different movement. This next section, called After All the Loves of My Life, slows down in tempo and tends to use quieter vocals. Here he takes the acceptance to another level, going as far as to assert that he will find another song and another dream. In other words, a new girlfriend. His passion for her creeps back in, however, when he promises Susie will forever remain the one. He's accepting, and he's also positive about what the future holds. As I said before, he's beyond the stage of post-breakup trauma, when he says, quote, "I will take my life into my hands and I will use it. I will win the worship in their eyes and I will lose it. I will have the things that I desire and my passions flow like rivers to the sky." This is especially moving when you realize this very song is what gave him so much recognition for his career and what helped him win the worship in the public's eyes. Fun fact, apparently the song was moving not only to the entire universe, but also to his ex Susie. As fate would have it, a few years after MacArthur Park's release, Jimmy Webb was able to track down Susie's whereabouts. He then hopped on a plane, showed up at her doorstep, and insisted that she take him back. Possibly a bit of a creepy gesture, but she had heard the song and knew what it meant, according to Jimmy. The two of them reconciled their romance, ended up getting back together, and actually staying together for a good few years afterwards. I guess the moral of the story is that a really good breakup song can win back its own subject.